everybody. Welcome to the lounge on this Friday evening. I'm sorry for the abrupt putting down of the music, but I don't even realize how loud that opening music is for you guys. So I want you guys to hear me loud and clear. Welcome to this Friday's edition of the lounge. Yes, summer is approaching. Do you guys have all your plans made? What's going on? I remember I told you if you were listening to the monthly energy forecast, which went out on the 15th of this month, which was only I know last week. I can't even keep my mind together on all of these dates. This Mercury retrograde and the eclipse season, everything's all confused. So if you guys have been having a lot of reschedules, cancellations, confusion, mix-ups, misunderstandings, that's all normal. It is all in my monthly energy forecast how you can make the best out of benefiting from this time frame. Plus we had a lunar eclipse also just a couple days back. So new endings. No, see, I'm already confused the way it is. Endings and new beginnings. So it's all about letting go, being free, feeling that freedom to let go of what no longer serves you. And if you don't get my monthly energy forecast, go into the link into this description of this video in Facebook or YouTube and make sure you're getting on our email list. It is free, but it's only exclusive to our email subscribers. So make sure you get on that list. It goes out the 15th of every month, and I go over every single day of the month and what are the best dates and times to make your key decisions in relationships, your career, relocation, finances, all of those things, because timing is everything. And if you said, Marissa, hey, I want to buy a house, buy a car, get married, propose to my girlfriend, make a big stock investment right now, I would say, oh my goodness, I hope you go into my monthly energy forecast because this is not a good time to do all this. So we have to go with the universal energy. We have to go with what consciousness is saying and tuning into that energy. So I have a few other announcements, which I hope that I'm so excited to talk about tonight. Number one, say hi in the comments. I'd love to see who's here tonight. I know I've been putting this out in our newsletter and on Facebook and on Instagram, but we are going to be doing a near death experience series. I polled you guys because for every 3 months, we change our guest lineup. So that means what you guys want to see, what you guys want to hear, the type of guests that you guys want to listen to. Last couple months were all about transformation, breaking our negative cycles and relationships and breaking your negative patterns so that you can be free in your life and make that big transformation. And then once I polled you guys on Facebook and on Instagram, you said, hey, we want to hear more about the afterlife. We want to hear more about near death experiences. We want to know more about our spirit guides, our angels, past lives. Some of you had even said aliens. So I don't have somebody for that yet, but we're looking into it and maybe even time travel, right? So do all those things exist? We don't know. So I have a very special guest for you tonight, and I can't wait to introduce her. Our interview today, I'm going to ask you guys to, I'll come in and tell you guys how we need to move about this, but feel free if you have any questions or comments for our guests tonight, feel free to write them in the chat, but just know that we might not be getting to those right away because when we recount somebody's story of their near-death experience, it's kind of has to be quiet and you can listen and feel free to post your comments and our guests will respond maybe after the show or, after she's done speaking, but she will get to your comments. We will get to your comments. So I just want to talk about who we have on tonight. Her name is Emilie Spear, and she is a successful businesswoman who has had a deep and lifelong spiritual practice. A few days after the birth of her twin daughters, unforeseen medical complications resulted in a life-changing near-death experience for her. Her vivid account of an eternal, graceful, and all-encompassing love is filled with insights on how to cultivate a heavenly experience within the day-to-day world of humanity. Oh, don't we need that? Because we have so much going on in the world right now that just a little bit of hope keeps us going. And that's what we're here to do tonight. So in the midst of this life-changing event, Emilie made a promise to share her experience of divine love in order to help others on their own journeys of inner healing and awakening. Wow. So some key tips. What's she going to talk about, right? The dynamic healing power of divine love that resides within each person. And her story is, I'm not going to tell any more about her story because I don't like to read stories of near death accounts or experiences because I want to hear them just as you're hearing them tonight and have my own organic response. And just this is an amazing moment. You guys all know I'm a medium, right? So I tend to connect with, just a messenger. I connect with those who have already gone over the other side and didn't come back. And then there are levels above that. There are levels above, you know, people who incarnate into human form and then go on the other side, and we have our ascended masters and all of those lovely divine spiritual beings on the levels above. And so for somebody who's had a near death experience, I'm just the postman, okay? Somebody wants to come to me, they're like, here's the letter, give it to this person, don't read it, don't analyze it, just give the message. But they don't tell me about what they do over there, what happens on the other side. So this is all new information for me. This is something that I'm not privy to on a day-to-day basis. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome to the show, and please give a warm welcome to Emilie Spears. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate that you are willing to kind of take your experience and inspire others with it by, going on to podcasts and coming on to our live stream. So I just want to tell you how grateful I am that you were willing to come on and share your experience with not only me, but with our audience to give them some inspiration and hope. So I really, really appreciate that.
You're
So,
welcome.
Emilie, I just want to know a little bit more about you before we get into your story, because I'm always interested before somebody has a near death experience, what are their beliefs about the afterlife? What are their beliefs about God, about life? So tell us just about your day to day life. Like, what did you have a job before you had this experience? Were you a working woman? You said it's a businesswoman. So I'm assuming before you became a mom, you had just a career. What was your life like? Did you seek out spiritual experiences? Did you have an interest in the other side or the afterlife? What were your beliefs before this happened to you?
So, my near death experience happened kind of more midlife, right? So, I had a lot of years before that where I'd lived a typical life. Like, grew up in a typical American family. I went to college, graduated, worked in corporate America, and then I met my husband in my mid 30s and started a family. And so it's kind of like the typical storyline. But what was sprinkled throughout my life, and especially even as a child, is I was always curious about the mystery of life in itself. And even though I grew up in like a Christian based family, my family was also very open to other religions. And so I had the pleasure of exposing myself to like Buddhism or other sorts of religions. And I was always on this quest internally to figure out what were the common themes across all religions. So I would say I am a very spiritual person and very open to how that is expressed in humanity in different languages or different belief systems. But what I found is across all of them, they all kind of teach about how to be kind and caring for others in love. As a child, I also felt very connected to the angels. And so early on, when I was about 7, I have this one memory where I recall a particular angel came in and wrapped her wings around me and reminded me that everything was going to be okay and that I was deeply loved. And from then on, even though, high school years are challenging, for teenage years, I always had that connection to this angel. I felt like it was a guardian angel that carried me through some of those more challenging times in my life.
Oh my God, that is just, and of course, I have a bunch of questions now about this. But when this angel came to you, I don't know. I've talked to some other people who have witnessed angels, and they said that they were like really, really tall and towering. Did you have that experience visual? Did this angel come to you in visually look like that?
Well, I was 7 years old and I was sad, so I'm crying. My head was
Oh,
down, And so what it felt like, the angel was very present, so very large. and the wings were bigger than me. One wing was bigger than me. And I just felt like she consumed me, like just embraced me at that point. So it was more of a sensation or a feeling. And it felt like the energy of the angel consumed the entire room.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but you actually visually saw the angel. Like, did you see her face or his face?
Not, I wouldn't say visually with the eyes per se. The way I experience angels is more of a felt sense.
Mhm.
And so it's more tactile, like where I could actually feel the pressure on my skin.
Wow.
There was like a real presence and penetrating like within me and dissolving whatever emotional feeling or thought patterns that were going on within me at that time seemed to be soothed.
Oh my God, that is it's beautiful. And when you're telling me this, I'm getting chills like while you're telling. So I can't even imagine when you're going to get into your near death experience story, how powerful that really is. And, I want to just ask you too. I mean, before you had your near death experience, I'm sure you had people in your life pass away. And did you believe that you know, life went on? Did you have a fear of death? Did you have any of those? What were your beliefs about the afterlife before you had this experience?
I always believe that our spirits continue on, that we're more than just the physical form, the human form. And so I did. I had lost two people, my godmother as well as my grandmother, whom I was very close to before my NDE. And when my grandmother passed, I was sitting outside with my dad and my grandfather. And when she actually physically passed, it was like this breeze came through and like tickled the back of our neck. And it was like a really still day, like there was no wind. And we all just felt like this joy coming through our body.
Mhm.
And we all thought, there goes grandma. There she goes. And so a part of me has always felt that we move on into another realm and continue whatever it is that is the journey for that individual person.
Yeah, it's just amazing when I hear people's accounts of these sort of things. Like, I never met you before, and I'm hearing your story and your experience. And, I have had people in my family that were in a room, when somebody passed, they said, "Oh my God, I felt like it was like a party. I felt exhilarated. I felt like I could fly." Like my mom, when her uncle that was 93 years old passed, she was in the room and she said, "It's so weird. I was expecting to be sad, but I felt like I could fly." And that exhilaration of maybe feeling that the other side was just opening that portal for him to make that transition. So it seems like you've had such already before your near death experience, like you've had an angel encounter, you had experiences from the other side letting you know they're okay. Um, and, so it feels like, you know, you are a special spiritual being that came to this earth. And it was like you have gotten those reassurances a couple times before, you know, you had this big experience in your life. So I also want to ask before we get into your story, um, did you find that your psychic abilities, your intuitive abilities, your prophetic abilities after you had your near death experience has grown or activated or become like otherworldly after you've had this experience?
Yes, I feel like the veil between the two worlds is extremely thin and sometimes disappears. And so part of that is having had a near death experience and having a very intimate one that eventually I'll share. I can always go back to and bring forward into the physical. And that's really been an interesting journey after the near death experience, is having such a beautiful experience. And then we're back into the human form and all of the things that we experience in our day-to-day life. How do you reconcile that? Right. So that's
Yes.
taken me years. And I still can say that there are times where I still go, gosh, how do I do this? How do I bring this in? And so it's a learning process, right? It's a training. Um, so yeah, I do believe that I have more access to that.
So when you say like the veil has disappeared, does that mean people from the other side are able to communicate with you now as well, or let you know they're okay, or people that you loved to give you signs that they weren't able to before?
Yes, I feel very connected to my own presence, and a lot of the presences that, like ascended masters, that are around me. Sometimes, some of my friends, like if their parents pass away, I can feel their parents' presence as well close by. Sometimes they whisper in my ear, and
Oh,
a message or something that they would like to relay to the other person. And just like what you said earlier, I'm just the messenger. I just try to relay that message as purely and cleanly as I possibly can without any sort of qualification, you know?
yeah, totally. And do you have any fear of death now that you've had this experience?
No.
No. So you're like 100% sure, like if somebody asks you, "Hey, does life go on? Is my loved one okay?" You can for certainty say, "You know what? They're great. They're fine. They're doing good."
Mhm. I had an experience where a dear friend, her father was passing, and he knew he was ultimately going to pass. And he was in the hospital, and he became very fearful of death. And
Mhm.
so I spent a lot of time with him, sharing my experience of the other side. And by being able to share that experience with him, really helped alleviate some of that fear for him as well. And that felt really good to be able to share that. And I love that you're doing this near death experience series, because I think that's, you know, the divine plan when more people come back with NDEs to share those experiences to help alleviate some of that fear around death for others.
Yeah, and I'm sure people are like, "Wow, she's already I mean, just I could just do a whole show on just the stories that you already told me." I mean, they're just so amazing, right? So, I'd like to let everybody in the chat know that Emilie, after her recall of her near death experience, will be available in the chat to answer your questions, or, I'll get back to you. But for now, we're just asking that the chat kind of, you guys just kind of listen and take it in, and we just would rather not any distractions when Emilie is recounting her near that death experience. And this is something I didn't know about people that had NDEs, is that when they're in recall, um, it's kind of like they go back, into that channel, and kind of can't be distracted. And that's something I've learned when Emilie uh, willingly came on the show, and we're very grateful for that. So let's just take a minute. And Emilie, are you ready to let our audience know kind of what happened that day?
Sure.
Awesome. Well, I will hand it over to you and let you take it from here.
Okay. So, as the intro had mentioned, that my near death experience happened after my twin girls were born. Um, and so they were born, and they were born early, about 5 weeks early, because I had developed a medical condition called preeclampsia, where my blood pressure rose. And so the way to ensure the health for all of us was to have an emergency C-section. So we went ahead and we did that. Two beautiful babies were born, a few days in the hospital, wonderful nurses that supported us. We went back home. However, 9 days later, I began to hemorrhage again. That brought me back into the emergency room. It was kind of a mystery, because nobody really understood why would I start hemorrhaging like that so many days after giving birth. So in the hospital, when I returned back to the hospital, I was delighted, because I saw my favorite nurse, her name is Tercy, and the doctor that I resonated most with, Dr. Ring. And when I was in the hospital room, they brought me back to mom and baby unit, so I was comfortable. They didn't understand what was happening. There were a lot of doctors in the room, a lot of nurses, a lot of chaos while I was lying in bed. What I did notice is that they were measuring how much blood that I was losing, and there was a whiteboard, and the numbers just continued to increase. And Tercy was sitting next to me, comforting me. And she whispered in my ear and she said, "Now, don't you worry. I used to work in the emergency room and I never lose people, and I'm not going to lose you." That was really comforting to know that. But it was a little nerve-wracking, just to be honest, because when I was looking at my blood pressure and the heartbeat, you know how you can see those things in the machines, my heart was becoming less and less frequent, and my blood pressure started to lower down. And I said to Tercy, "I'm concerned about my blood pressure." And she said, "Don't you worry. I've got, a double rapid blood transfuser machine coming up. We're going to take care of this. You're going to be just fine. I won't lose you." Time went by, not very much, and I started looking at the clock. And at the clock was a typical clock. It was a white background with black numbers on it. And then all of a sudden, the numbers disappeared. It all turned white. And I told Tercy, "The clock is white. Everything is turning white." And she said, "Don't you worry. You're going to stay with me." And she dropped my head so that most of the blood can go to my head. And I kind of saw at this moment that they were trying to put that double rapid transfusion machine into my body. And I could see my body squirming, like as if it were in pain, but I didn't feel any pain. I had no pain at all. And what I was still lying in the bed, but what I could see were these silver white cords that were pulsing, that were coming out of everybody's head. Some were thicker, some were brighter, some were pulsing a little bit more. The one with Dr. Ring seemed to be a little bit brighter, and even Tercy had hers. At that moment, I realized there wasn't really much I could do but to trust Tercy and her skills. All the doctors were kind of scrambling around, and I just went into meditation, and I surrendered. The next thing I knew at that moment is I was like in a movie room, theater room, and it was a big screen in front of me. And the movie that was being played were memories of my life, little flashes of different events or people that I had known. This was my life review. What was being shown to me was certain situations, and I could feel my feeling. Like if it was something joyful and happy, I could feel the joy and happiness. But what was different was that I could feel the other person's feelings as well. So I could feel my friends' feelings and their joy. And it just magnified that sensation within me. Well, also in this life review, I saw moments where I was irritated or frustrated with somebody, and I could feel that feeling. But I also felt the other person's feeling of their frustration or irritation, and that was magnified within me as well. I also saw some things that were counts I couldn't even really remember, like a stranger in a grocery store where I just said hello and I smiled, just like any ordinary moment. But then what I saw was how that changed that person that day and how that helped them just feel more happiness. And that was a huge ripple effect that went on. And I had no idea in my living life how magnificent that small act became as it carried forward. So there was these themes of all of these different memories. And what was welling up inside of me was this question: how could I love better? How could I have handled certain situations better? And then immediately I left the movie theater room and I was placed in this environment. It was pure gold and shimmery and bright light. And I was sitting right at this bank of a pool. This pool was completely still. There was not a ripple in it. And nothing else was around me but these wispy golden clouds. And as I was sitting there thinking and pondering of how could I have loved better, I didn't know in those situations where I wasn't creating that love, or I felt limited in that, I didn't know. And what came over me was forgiveness and mercy. And I was told, you are innocent and you are safe in your unknowing. And you're forgiven for all those mistakes that you made in your human life. And that made me feel a lot better. But here I am, still at this bank in this pool. There wasn't much to do except kind of feeling this thought of how could I love better? And then my little child kind of came up. I had a magical childhood, when we used to go to this lake and we used to skip rocks. And I thought, well, maybe I'll do that now. I'll just skip some rocks. So in my heart, I was thinking of a child and I was happy. I thought, well, maybe I'll just throw that in the pool. And I did. I threw happiness and joy into the pool. And all of a sudden, this pool, these ripples came up and met that. And it was like the pool was dancing and it was joyful and it met every little piece of those emotions that I threw in and merged, became one, and dissolved into the pool. And there was absolute stillness. Well, that piqued my curiosity. I had no idea what was before me. And I was still thinking about my life review and thinking, gosh, I wish I could. I had regret, I had sadness around certain situations. And before I knew it, that feeling went right into the pool. And these ripples started to well into the pool and met each one of those feelings ever so gently, became one and dissolved into the pool in absolute stillness. And a breeze from a far off distance came through and came right through me. And it was like washing all of that sadness and regret out of my being. And the sensation of bliss rose within me. And at that point, I knew I was somewhere pretty special. And as I continued to look back at my life review, I experienced the feeling of regret. I wish I hadn't done certain things or had done them better. So that's kind of one of those big feelings, right? Shame or guilt. And so as I pulled that feeling together again, this time I decided to crawl up to the bank of the pool because I was kind of embarrassed, right? Here I am in this magical place and I'm going to drop shame into the pool. So I just kind of dropped it in just ever so slightly, kind of not wanting it to notice, but I kind of wanted it to. And I crept back and I sat down and I had my head down and a tear came down. And a gentle breeze from the distance came and met me and lifted my heart up in my chin and said, "Do not fear for what you shall see." So I sat there very softly and the pool came up and gently met every little piece of the shame and guilt with this most magnificent love, ever so gentle and sweet, until every little piece of that was consumed and brought back down into the pool, into absolute stillness. Then another breeze came through me and washed all of that away. I noticed my body, whatever it was, became thinner and thinner. I was disappearing, and I felt lighter and lighter, and the bliss was increasing. And I thought, wow, this is an incredible opportunity. Still, I had more in my life review that was still in the back of my mind, and I still wanted to figure this out, how to love better. And so I said, well, I'm forgiven. I was innocent in all my mistakes. What if I put in what I felt was the ultimate? What about my frustration or my irritation or my anger or self-righteousness or pride? Those feelings where we are like so full. So I said, I'm going to do it. And I stood up and I felt all that energy and I threw it into the pool. And I stood back and I finally felt some fear because I knew the pool was going to respond. And how was it going to respond? Oh, it sure did. It came up and went like this and worked every little piece of that energy. As quick as I threw it in, it was as quick to respond to it and met every crevasse and every single edge until it was completely met and consumed and dissolved into the pool of peace, where there was absolute stillness. At that point, I sat down, deeply humbled. I knew that this pool could meet anything and love anything. It didn't matter what I gave. And I was so humbled at the magnificence of this divine love. I was melting, and I became one with that pool. It was consuming me now, and I was surrendering everything. For this was true bliss, to become one with that love. And then suddenly, as I was in this blissful state, I was taken back up and I was placed back down into another location. So I wasn't at the pool of peace. I wasn't at the bank. I was uplifted even up further. And I was pinned. My vertebrae was stacked. Boom, 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 boom. Straight line and pinned. I knew I could not move. I was completely surrounded by this light that would not allow me to move. And honestly, I didn't want to move because I knew something was going to happen next that was very important for me to be still as the pool of peace. And I remained so. And out of the far off distance, I heard a voice and it said, "This is divine love." And a projection of light came down. It looked like a finger came down and went right through my forehead and ignited a star. And then suddenly I found myself in a funnel spinning around, going somewhere, but I was in such great love. It didn't matter where I was going until suddenly this beautiful young face, this little girl, came off to the right side. She came right here. And she said, Mom, remember? You promised me to be my mother." And I looked at her and I could see another beautiful young face behind her that was deeply saddened. And beyond that, I could see these journeys, these pathways, where one pathway was where I was in their life, and then another pathway where I was not in their life. And I could see the circumstances and the dynamics of all that. I could not bear in that moment to not be in their life. I had to be their mother. Bam! Suddenly, I could see myself on the hospital bed. I was back into the hospital room. I could see the doctors and the silver lines. I could see Tercy. I was still out of my body. I could see it, and it was struggling. I also saw 5 angels standing off to the right side of Tercy, and they had these musical instruments I'd never seen before and playing this beautiful music I'd never heard before. They were taking Tercy's prayers and lifting them up with this music. And then right next to her on her left side was Jesus. He had his right hand on the back of her heart, his left hand on his shoulder, and I could see him whispering into her ear. He turned and he looked at me, and I looked into his deep eyes, and I saw the pool of peace, the radiance of that divine love. I just stared into his eyes. And he said, "Do you want to go back?" And I said, "Yes." And then he asked me, Will you take what you learned? And I said, I promise. And then suddenly I was back in that movie theater. But this time, I wasn't seeing my past. I was seeing my future. And all the people that I hadn't been in relationship in that present moment were there. And in that moment, I said, I'm doing this differently. I want to bring in that divine love that the Pool of Peace had taught me. I want to apply that in all my relationships and all my activity. And I could see how that was changing everything, not only for me, but for all the people that interacted with me. It was uplifting. And I was so contagious. I wanted to keep going and keep going and keep going. And then I heard Jesus say to me, it's time. And I got pulled out of the movie theater room. I didn't get it all done. I wish I had, but I hadn't. That's okay. Something to work on. And I could see my body, and I knew I had to get back into it, but I had no idea how to do that. It's like, no idea. But I felt the gentle push to just jump, like take a leap of faith, right? And as I did, I heard Jesus say to me, trust. And I could hear that voice as I went into this great abyss of complete darkness. There was nothing like the Pool of Peace where I had been. It was cold. It was dark. I didn't know where I was going. There was nothing there. I could hear the vibration of trust, and I just held on to my heart with the image of the Pool of Peace. And then suddenly I could hear Tercy's voice. She said, come back, Emilie, come back. Stay with me, stay with me. I thought, I'll follow her voice. So I followed her voice. And then the next thing I knew, I opened my eyes. I could see Tercy. And off to her right side were the 5 angels. And to her left side was Jesus. And he gave me a wink. And then suddenly, Dr. Ring came up to me and she said, we think we know what might be going on. We have a couple options. And I said to her, well, whichever one would guarantee that I could be the mother of my children. And she said, okay. And then suddenly, the operating room opened up. The most skilled surgeon came right on duty, right in that moment. And I looked at Jesus and he gave me another wink. I said, aha, I see. Everything's going to be okay. Everything will be taken care of because I made that promise to Jesus to bring this forward. And that from then on was a journey of trying to figure out, how do I integrate all that? How do I take that experience and bring that down into the physical form?
Well, I'm a little emotional right now. I'm like, I'm not going to get emotional. Wow. Like, I don't even know what to, like, I'm pretty in control of my feelings on this show. And this is the first time I'm like tearing up here because, it's just so powerful. It's just so powerful. Yeah. Yeah. Some of the things you talked about, I can relate to. And you're all worried that you're going to be like, not know what to say. And here I am like trying to host the show and I don't know what to say. Yeah. I want to ask a couple questions. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a lot of questions. The first one is when you came out of your body and you started to see the life review and then you went to the Pool of Peace. Was the life that you left like in any way in your mind? Because you didn't mention that at all. Like that, did that even occur to you? Or were you just so present within the experience that you forgot that like life on earth and the people you were leaving existed? Was there any sadness about that?
No, I didn't feel like the loss of like I was leaving other people.
Yeah.
Until my daughters came into the funnel. That life review, what was mysterious about that was the memories that were kind of on the reel. I wouldn't say were the ones that I thought were most significant, maybe so, but I was surprised to see some of those things that I would have viewed as insignificant, like the person on the, walking by somebody on the sidewalk,
Yeah.
or the children that I had met in my travels. I didn't realize that that was as powerful as they were. But I don't think I had any, the only callback was really when my daughters came.
Did you know that you were dying or dead, or were you just so present in whatever was going on that you didn't have any sense that there was a change in dimension or energy?
When I saw my blood pressure go and the numbers that were so high on the board, I knew I was bleeding out.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of panic in the room, but there was something that was inside of me that said, don't go there. Don't go there. And so before my ND, I do have like a meditative practice, and so I thought, well, what else am I going to do but to meditate? Because that was the one tool I had in my toolbox to bring calm to me. At that point, there wasn't much I could do. I released it.
So when you were in your life review, were you like, oh, I came out of my body and I'm on the other side? Or did you have any knowledge of where your spirit was at that time?
Not at the life review.
No.
But at the pool of peace, because the sensation was so refined, I felt like I was in the cloud of love.
Yeah.
And I thought there were some feelings when I got there, like, am I in the presence of God? And if I am, I better be good. Right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And I think that's why when I started interacting with the pool of peace, I was interacting it with like the good sides, right?
Yeah.
Of all
Yeah.
things that, I know God would, quote unquote, approve of.
Yes. Right. You had to be good. It had to be like a good student.
But the life review was still like in my consciousness at that point, where I think when I reflect back now, not during the NDE, but afterwards, I was going through a purification process at that point. I had an opportunity to purify any emotions or feelings or, those emotional cycles that we can habits. I had a chance to release those. And there was I was learning that when I was at the pool of peace, that it was such a beautiful opportunity to heal and to release that.
Do you feel that now that you're back, you've had a profound personality or psychic change in, the way you relate to people? Or do people still recognize you, or are they like, you're you, but you're a little bit different in the way you respond or react to situations? Or do you recognize yourself, I guess, is the question.
That's a big one, because it's not uncommon with people who have NDEs. You come back, you feel like you have this new birth, as if you're starting a new life, but you're back in the same body and you're back with the same relationships that you had before the NDE. However, like for me, what I felt, I was a different person. How my inner landscape had just been cleared. And so the patterns, the dynamics of the relationships, like with my mom or my dad or my husband, let's say, the close relationships still kind of existed, right? How the dynamics of those, but how I was receiving that energy, as well as how I wanted to respond, changed. And so it was I would say it was confusing for a while, for a few years, because I just wasn't responding or reacting the same way. And so some relationships ended up leaving my life because I wasn't playing into those dynamics the same way. And then new people came into my life as well. So there was a big change, and I still think it continues as I integrate more and more of the pool of peace.
I had a question. I always have questions. Did you feel alone and misunderstood when you came back and you had this profound inner landscape change? Did you feel like people just didn't get it and they couldn't understand? And did you feel like while you had this tremendous experience, like you felt alone?
Yes.
These are deep questions. I'm sorry.
No, these are great questions because I think in some ways, even though I had an NDE, I think we all can feel that way too, like misunderstood, or, we all have spiritual experiences possibly, and yet we don't feel met, right? I think that's a pretty common feeling, I think. But when I came back, I had a really hard time finding the words or the feelings, and the few people that I confided in didn't quite know how to embrace that.
Mhm.
And I didn't really know who I could talk to about it. I did 7 years later. I knew I had to go back to the hospital, and I did meet with the nurse Tercy and Dr. Ring. Also, the other part, after my last surgery, I was in the ICU, and you wouldn't believe this nurse that cared for me, his name was Angel.
Oh my god.
So,
Wow.
so when I went back to visit them, I needed to see that clock again because that was uh, a key point of the NDE for me, my experience. So we went back into that room, and I asked Tercy, what was she doing when she was over me? She said she was praying to Jesus like she had never prayed before. And then I told her I saw Jesus. And so that was validating, right? At that point, like to be able to talk to some people who were part of that experience. Another thing that happened 2 years later, when my daughter started to speak, they say little words here and there. And we were going to the zoo, and we were in the car. And my one daughter, she finally said her first sentence. And her first sentence was, "Mommy, are you going to die again?"
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's her first sentence. And
Yeah.
then I turned around and I looked at her. I said, "No, I'm here to stay." And then in my heart, I knew that my experience on the other side was real, and that she was there and she had an account of an event. It might have looked different for her, but there was definitely a knowing that she was losing her mother. And so some of these small, events helped me get the courage to kind of go back in and explore the pool of peace. And over the last couple of years, I've met some beautiful people that have helped me pull out and try to find those words. But the moment when I actually wrote the pool of peace, the actual writing, I sat down and I asked my presence, "What is it you want me to share?" And then all the words just came out. And that was really helpful for me to actually have the story written down.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to when you talked about the two pathways that you saw, your future where you weren't in your children's lives and you stayed on the other side, and the pathway where you came back. And it's just validating for me. The work that I do is when I'm doing intuitive sessions or hearing from people on the other side that say, I had a choice and I decided, and I'm like, how could I prove that, and like, well, with somebody who comes back and says, yeah, this does exist, I did have a choice. Because there are people that obviously decided to stay on the other side and they come back and say to me, oh yeah, it was my time, or I had a choice and I saw what my life was going to be like if I stayed and I didn't want to have those burdens or whatever it was,
Mhm.
and they decided to go. So I always thought it was interesting that some spirits or souls had a choice. And you know it, as a medium, I'm just telling people what I'm getting and what people are saying, but there's like no real evidence that you know that really does happen. So, and even in life, people come to me, I say, you know what, I'm not a psychic because I don't believe that there's only one pathway for you to predict your future. I look at people's lives and it's like lanes on a highway or like a big choose your own adventure story. And the pathway looks different whether you choose one vibration or frequency over the other or one pathway over the other. But we still do have destiny points that I believe that we hit. So what I want to ask you is, do you remember any of those? You don't have to speak of them in detail if you don't want to, but do you remember like what you saw like in detail of, do you remember like are there things that are coming up in your future which you know are coming, I guess is the question.
Oh, my path, like my second review that I saw.
Yes, yes.
It was very clear to me, and I'll keep this really simple, is the more choices that I made from a point of love, the more fruitful my future became.
Wow, that's so simple.
It
That's
is
so great.
simple. And so oftentimes when I'm still working on this, right, I'm still in this human body working on this, is I'll just stop in a certain situation and just ask the question, what's the most loving thing or the most kind thing, or what's the most thing, what can I do or say that would create more peace and harmony? And so then I just do that and trust that whatever comes next will be of not only my benefit, but for the benefit of all. And so that has been really my guiding principle since my NDE. I'm sure, I had that before the NDE as well.
Yeah.
Because I think that's our true nature as all human beings. We want to do good. But this has more profound responsibility, having known that.
Yeah. And just, I just obviously want to know all these things. Jesus, right? Did he look like what he looks like in the paintings or in, when you see him in the paintings, does he look like that? Does he have the long hair? Like, does Jesus look the same as how us human beings portray him to look?
Well, I was captivated by his eyes, and they were blue, and they were just so filled with this unbelievable love and um, grace and acceptance and humility. What I saw was his humbleness. And so the gown that I saw that he wore was golden in nature, but also kind of like a natural fiber, like a wool fiber, natural white wool fiber, but had sparkles of gold in it. And so he was very approachable, if you will. He did have long hair like this, but his presence was just unbelievable.
And it seems like he had a sense of humor too.
Oh, he did.
Yeah. Like he wasn't all serious, like, hello, this is your divine master. Like, no,
No.
he seemed like he had like like he was kind of like, hey, this isn't a big deal. Like we're good.
Yeah,
Like,
I gotcha.
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah, he
Like
was
he's kind of cool. Kind of cool.
there wasn't like this like preachy or like that kind of thing. It was very much love based and what was a benefit. He did ask me, remember, he did ask me, do you want to go back? So I had two opportunities to make that choice. Once with my daughter in the funnel, and then also with Jesus. But I think the reason why he asked me again was I made that promise to him to bring down the pool of peace.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes what I've been still trying to dissect is that, how do we come into our lives from the spirit world into our physical human lives? Oftentimes during that dark area, that kind of darkness that I mentioned about, we forget who we really are. And so part of what I've been exploring along with this experience is it's not about acquiring knowledge or acquiring skills or looking outward for this. It's all about going within oneself and remembering who we are, remembering our divine self that already is there, and is just trying to get through that, that kind of dark spot, that realm, whatever that is, and connecting into our divine self so that we can bring in our remembrance of who we really are.
Yeah. It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff. And I just wanted to let people know if you're coming in at the middle of the stream, you can always go to the replay tomorrow. But if you really want to read Emilie's story, you can download it. Pool of Peace story for free at awakeningpeacewithin.com. So if you want to sit there and you're like, okay, it was good to hear the interview, but I want to read this. Just go to awakeningpeacewithin.com and you can follow Emilie. I believe this is her personal Facebook page. So you might want to take a screenshot of this, or we'll put it in the description on Facebook. And also, Emilie does have a Facebook group where like-minded people who are, I'm not going to talk about the group because I don't know anything about the group, but Become Higher Self, you can join. But it seems like it's like-minded people are coming together for healing, is what I understand it to be. But Emilie, please explain what your group is about.
So Become Higher Self is like-minded people, or even people with different backgrounds. It really doesn't matter. But people, the one common theme is trying to explore and connect with their higher self within them. So each person has their own divine higher self, and we're there to support each other to discover, explore, and bring that in to here we are, the human realm. We also have, there's 3 other people that we do some voluntary healing sessions for people who might need a little extra help to kind of get through whatever challenges that they're having. And we also provide one-on-one mentorship as well. It's all on the Become Higher Self group page as well.
That's awesome. So I would encourage all of you Lounnggeeeites to, join and connect with Emilie. And what I found, just before we go, what I find interesting is that through my experiences with the other side, it's just like there's no religion that's right or wrong. It's like you go to college, you might go to a big college, you might go to a small college, you might go to university, you get the same degree, right? You get a liberal arts degree if that's what you want. So I feel like if people always want to ask, well, is it bad, if is this against Christianity or Catholicism or Judaism? And what you've learned from, having this experience is if you love and if you follow one path to God and have a spiritual practice, like that's okay with him, right? Or her, or whatever this universal energy is. Do you find that God loves all people who practice all religions and have all, like, it's just like not one's right and one's wrong?
My experience of God is oneness, and he loves everybody and everything. Everything comes out of that great source of love and is created from that and returns to it. So there's many paths back to the same central source. And I think that is, I just feel that like it's diversity and unity, and God loves everything underneath the umbrella of humanity.
As long as we follow a path, right? That's all he cares about.
We're growing.
As long as we follow a path and
It
want
is
to spiritually grow, look
It
to do that.
easier. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is easier if we choose constructive ways of being and living and caring for ourselves and others. We will have a more joyful, peaceful, harmonious experience here. So it is beneficial for sure.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, I know I said I'd only ask a couple questions, but I asked a lot more than that. And I really, really am grateful. Thank you for everyone in the lounge that's watching tonight. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'm sure Emilie will get back to you once the replay hits and she goes into the chat and sees your questions, and I'll get back to you. But it's just a little bit of a different format right now with this series because people are recounting such profound experiences. And we're so grateful to have you on the show, Emilie. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you guys next week. So, and have more experiences with our near-death experience series. And we look forward to seeing what you guys think of it and if you are finding some hope and inspiration. So we'll see you next week. Bye, guys. Thank you, Emilie. We'll see you soon.